Hello and welcome to a kind of different video. I felt like I wanted to talk and get some thoughts about the 2021 F1 season finale out of my system. This is the second time I'm writing this script already, as I wasn't happy with the first version. Now, before we get into this video, where I'll first talk about what happened last Sunday that was so infuriating, let's just get this out of the way. I'm neither supporter or hater of any of the drivers competing for the championship. I'm a Ferrari fan and very pleased with them finishing third in the Constructors' Championship and actually fighting for 1 or 2 race wins this year, although none of them came. So I wanted to enjoy a fair and even fight for the championship like most of us did. And now look at where we are. We're once again not talking about the racing, but about the stewarding. Max Verstappen did not deserve to win his first F1 championship after such a great season from him in these most controversial circumstances, and Lewis Hamilton did not deserve to lose his record-breaking 8th championship like that, and such a great season of F1 racing, probably one of the greatest ever, did not deserve to end like that. And this is neither any team or driver's fault. This was all screwed up by the race direction. But let's first start with a description of what actually happened that weekend. Max Verstappen took pole position on Saturday with an absolutely magnificent lap, but he had to start on the soft tyres, as he flight spotted as mediums, with which he wanted to start in Q2. That might have given him an advantage at the start, but as these tyres do not last as long as the mediums that Hamilton was starting on, this might have been a disadvantage for the strategy. However, Max had a little bit of wheel spin at the start and was passed by Lewis into turn 1. Then, after the first long straight, Max tried to get back into the lead with a huge dive bomb up the inside that would have resulted in the crash had Lewis turned in for the corner as you'd usually do. Lewis then cut the chicane to avoid the crash almost caused by Max's desperate move and rejoined the track with a bigger lead than he had before that corner. He let that gap shrink again though in the following corners. Red Bull then demanded that Lewis had to give that position back in regard to what happened in Saudi Arabia 1 week earlier. But that was a different kind of situation, as back there it was Max almost causing a crash as well, by braking way too late for a corner and then cut that corner himself and regained the lead by that. There he was demanded to give that position back to Hamilton. This time it was Max almost crashing into Lewis again, but this time it was Lewis who cut the chicane to avoid a collision that would 100% be Max's fault. Demanding from Hamilton that he had to give back the position is like rewarding Max for almost causing a crash and punishing Hamilton for avoiding a crash that would not have been his fault. So the decision that there was no action necessary by the stewards here was 100% right in my opinion. The complaining of Red Bull afterwards was probably just a desperate attempt to get the lead back, as being stuck in P2 with the worst tyre choice would have made their chances to win that championship look pretty grim. Should there not be any unusual situation, which they can't influence, to get them back into contention. The race then was pretty much controlled by Lewis. He had a nice, hard and fair battle with Perez after his first pit stop, which brought Max closer to him again after he built up a significant lead already, but continued to build a gap directly afterwards. Then, later in the race, Giovinazzi parked his car with a technical problem, bringing out the virtual safety car. Max used this to get a pit stop, under which he would not lose as much time as with a pit stop on the green flag, to get fresh tyres and to try to hunt down Lewis for the remaining laps. A couple of laps from the end, however, it came apparent that that wouldn't work, because after bringing the gap down a couple of seconds, he wasn't getting any nearer to Lewis again. It looked like a done deal already now. But if you know Formula 1, you know it's not over till it's over, and sometimes then it isn't even over yet. With 5 laps to go, Nicholas Latifi spun in the wall, bringing out the safety car, and this is where it really gets dramatic. The safety car came out exactly at the moment when Lewis passed the pits, so he could not change tyres anymore without losing a ton of positions. And even if he had the opportunity for a stop when the safety car was already out, Mercedes could not have done that, as they'd conceded track position to Verstappen, who in that case would have stayed out probably, hoping for the race to finish under the safety car. Verstappen was in the prime position to just react and do the opposite of what Mercedes were doing. Mercedes' hands were pretty much tied here. Then of course Verstappen came in because he could get a free pit stop for fresh soft tyres, meaning should the race restart he will probably easily get past Lewis. That being said, it was still a high possibility that there's too little laps remaining to get to a restart. Either way, would there have been a regular safety car procedure and Hamilton would have lost the race after the restart against Max and his fresher tyres, that would have been fine. Unlucky, sure, but fine. This is part of the sport, and we have seen that so often. Heartbreak is part of it, but not in a manufactured and forced way that we've seen last week. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. First, let's continue with the events in chronological order. Now, another interesting thing was that now between Lewis, directly behind the safety car, still leading the race, and Max in P2, there still were a couple of lapped cars in the way. And this is a key factor in what happened next. Halfway through the third last lap, and Marshall still on track clearing the spot where Latifi crashed, Race Direction gave their first strange order. Unlike what is usually done behind the safety car, lapped cars should not overtake the safety car and unlap themselves in order to have the correct order restored behind the safety car. Now I imagine this decision was made because under no circumstance they would have wanted to finish under safety car conditions. If they applied the standard protocol manifested in Article 48.12 in the sporting regulations, there would have not been enough time for a restart, as they couldn't let the lapped cars get out of the way this lap because there were still people on track, but they would have needed to wait another lap to do so, and then the standard procedure also requires another lap of safety car after the last lapped car has passed the leader. So in order to at least have some sort of restart for the final lap, they probably said, well, let's just leave them as they are, pretty much securing the championship for Hamilton, as Max needed to get past these cars first and probably not would have been able to get past Hamilton then. Now of course Red Bull were not happy with that, and kinda justified so, as that would have been kind of a Mickey Mouse restart with no real racing going on, as there still were lapped cars in the way of not only Max Verstappen but other drivers as well. And Race Direction, being on top of their game that day, revoked that decision a lap later and replaced it with an even worse one. Now the first one would have been just stupid and kinda pointless, but their second decision was outright scandalous and massively unfair. Now all of a sudden they ordered to let the 5 lapped cars between Lewis and Max pass, but not everyone else, and then immediately afterwards restarted the race. This gave a huge advantage to some and a huge disadvantage to others at the restart, and not just to the ones for whom it's obvious. Lewis Hamilton had the shield of lapped cars behind him removed for the final lap. Max Verstappen got to keep his shield of lapped cars, namely Ricciardo and Stroll, to give him a distance to P3 and everyone else. And let's not forget that this is unfair for Ricciardo, Stroll and Schumacher, as well, as they should have been right behind the lapped cars that were allowed to overtake the safety car, but now all of a sudden we're a lap down, as they were not allowed to overtake the safety car, which means they were denied of a fight for points in the final lap. Only Max Verstappen had the lapped cars ahead of him removed to give him the chance to get another position at the final lap. Sainz and everyone else behind was shielded from the top 2. Bottas, for example, as well, who with a blistering restart could have helped Lewis theoretically by trying to get past Max. Now, it would have obviously been hugely unlikely that they would have actually played a role in the title-deciding fight at the top for the final lap, but in a fair competition, you need to at least give everyone the same chance to improve their position in their given equipment. Everyone behind Max who had lapped cars ahead of them were treated differently than him, and that is something that should not happen. At the end of that, Max obviously took the lead, the checkered flag, and the world title in that order on the final lap. Mercedes immediately protested the restart, which I get because in my opinion they're absolutely right to do that. The restart was not in accordance with the rules, as only some, but not all lapped cars were allowed to overtake the safety car, and after that we didn't even have the safety car enter the pits at the following lap, but the very same lap after that unlapping was done. The first protest was denied with the reasoning that is as dodgy as everything that happened in that last 3 laps. They actually admitted that they didn't follow the restart procedure and quote some kinda random other articles on why they did that. For example, 84.13, which states that when the message safety car comes in is shown, it will actually come in, which overrules 84.12 in their point of view, which makes no sense at all, as this is like saying, well, we didn't follow the rules in pulling the safety car in that lap, but we did so because we pulled the safety car in. That's like coming to court after being accused of murder and saying, well, yes, I broke the law by murdering someone, but I did so because I killed them, and then expect to be freed of all charges. They also quote Article 15.3 for a reason of why they had the right to restart the race, which says that the race director has the power to override decisions of the clerk of the course, for example, the use of the safety car. But it doesn't say that the race director had the power to overrule written regulations. If that is the interpretation, we could just throw the written rules in the bin, as the race director can just decide what he feels like. So their initial dismissal of Mercedes' protest is as dodgy as their stewarding in the final laps. Mercedes now want to protest against the decision at the highest court of the FIA, and what happens next, well, we don't know yet. All we know is race direction messed up big time. And to emphasize this once again, this mess has nothing to do with any team or driver. Max and Red Bull didn't do any wrong there, and neither did Lewis and Mercedes. And they're absolutely right to protest. This has nothing to do with being a sore loser, as they probably have been screwed over. By the way, they all congratulated Max and RB, so there's no hard feeling towards them either. No one wants to have the championship decided in the court, me neither, but if we get such a decision, this is solely the fault of race direction, because they are responsible for this shit show. Now, of course, it's easy to look at things in hindsight, but from the makers of the pinnacle of motorsport, we could expect that they could be able to handle such a situation well under pressure, and even more so if you saw random people and fans of the sport, not just one or two, come up with the best possible solution to this on social media, even while the safety car was still out and Massey was still flip-flopping back and forth. But more on that in a bit. Let's look at the three alternatives on how this situation could have been resolved better. The first one is the one that was originally communicated 3 laps from the end. This one is almost as bad as the one they actually took, but at least it's fair because everyone was treated the same and no cherry picking would have taken place on who was allowed to unlap themselves and who didn't. We then have restarted on the green flag racing lap that also would have been sort of useless, maybe even chaotic with lapped cars in the way, left, right and center, and Red Bull would have probably been protesting against that, as well as the standard procedure wasn't followed in that scenario either. At least it would have been easier to justify that, as they could have said, we wanted to finish on the green flag, but there was not enough time to let all the lapped cars through for that, so we decided that they all stay. So that is the same for everyone. Still a shitty decision, to be honest. The second one is the one that theoretically would have been the right one. Follow the rules of the standard procedure, which would have meant we don't get the restart at all. Sure, this would have been disappointing for Red Bull and us fans, as it would have been the dullest result, but at least it would have been within the rules, without any interference from the race direction and without legal drama afterwards. As sure, disappointment would have been high, but Red Bull wouldn't have had any reason to protest that result, and we would have had a champion without any legal doubts surrounding the race result. But I get that this idea isn't popular either. But there's no guarantee to finish a race under green flags. There's just an agreement that they try to do so, but if that comes at the cost of this mess and questionable interference with the championship result, it probably would have been better to just let that one finish on the safety car. So, let's get to the idea that so many people had, and that would have been fair, thrilling, and an amazing show, and, well, determining the champion in the best possible way. Red flag the race and restart with a couple of laps to go. This way everyone could have changed tires, the field would have been bunched up, we would have seen a fair and equal fight for the win, and with it, the championship. And everyone, apart from those disappointed in the result, would have been happy. It would have been last lap drama without feeling forced and manufactured, like the one we've seen on Sunday. It also could have been so easy. With 3 laps to go, the race director must have seen what was coming, otherwise we wouldn't have got these strange procedure changes lap by lap. They must have realized at that point that no matter what they decide now, will decide the championship. And that's not what they wanted, and I understand that. A championship decided in the stewards' room is not the best thing to happen. Applying regular rules or letting no lapped cars pass the safety car would have granted Lewis the championship. Doing what they did pretty much guaranteed Max the championship. I'm sure they didn't want either of it, they just wanted a show on the final lap. But that show was not an equal battle, it was a forced, manufactured battle with rules being applied very unbalanced. So why not say at that point, look, this is getting too hot for us, no matter what we do with the restart, we decide the championship. Let's throw out the red flag, pause this race and get going for the last couple of laps, all on fresh tires, all in the same lap, and most importantly, all in the correct order. That would have been perfect. And that would have been called modern racing, Michael Masi, not that weird stuff we saw last weekend. Now, some people might argue now, wouldn't that be unfair for Max because his advantage of fresh tires for the restart would have been neglected? And I don't think so. This would have been a settlement even kind of in favor of Verstappen, because had the rules been applied correctly, there would not have been any chance for him to take the lead no matter what, as there would not have been a restart. By red flagging the race, he still would have got his chance to pass Lewis for the championship that Red Bull initially hoped for with the safety car, but he was never guaranteed that, as I've said, because under normal circumstances there would not have been any restart. And people that think that this is karma for Silverstone, come off it. A, two wrongs don't make a right, and B, yes, Lewis' penalty could or maybe should have been harsher, like a drive-through or 10-second stop and go, but he still would have finished that race pretty high and gain on Max with one of the harsher penalties. And disqualification is out of the question because it wasn't on purpose, no matter how much you want to believe that, as this could have very well been both of them out of the race. We can't plan something like that. By the way, Max could have prevented that crash as well by backing out of it when Lewis was alongside him on the old pit straight, just like Lewis backed out so often this season when a crash would have been Max's fault. This is called risk management and is also part of the sport. But this is a whole different debate. The standard penalty for Lewis' misbehavior was applied, so whether we agree on that or not, we need to leave this debate out of the one we're having here, because that decision, at least, is justifiable by the rulebook. But now, what should be done about this, since we can't change the past? Well, it would be the worst possible ending to this season to have the championship stripped away from Max and Red Bull in court, and while I think Mercedes are right to protest the decision for the restart, I don't think they should get the championship. That would be punishing Max for something that was not his fault. And I get that Mercedes might feel robbed as well, because they have a point. Masi bending the rules and flip-flopping his choices cost them the Drivers' Championship on Sunday. But the decision was made and can't and shouldn't be undone. This would throw the entire sport into disregard and be hugely unfair to Max and Red Bull. The mistake lies 100% with the race director, so probably he should be the one facing the consequences. In that case, being fired from the role as race director so that he can never mess up like this again. And if the consequence of Mercedes' protest will be that Masi will be thrown out and replaced with someone better who is actually able to make a reasonable and fair decision under pressure, then this would probably be the best outcome of it, and something we can all agree on. Because if there's something we F1 fans probably mostly can agree on, it's this. Masi out. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this kind of different video and feel free to discuss in the comments, but please stay civilized, don't go at each other's throats. Now I can understand there's frustration, as I am frustrated as well by all of the mess that was caused in that last couple of laps, but please stay nice. I'll see you all again